The leaves rustled like whispered warnings, hinting at a danger lurking under Timberfall's tranquil facade. What if the true monster was not in the jungle, but within the hearts of the villagers themselves? In the heart of a sprawling jungle where the trees intertwine like fingers, sat Timber Falls, an isolated village cradled by nature's embrace. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and blooming hibiscus, vibrant colors breaking through the green foliage. The villagers often spoke of the whispers of the ancient spirits that watched over them, legends passed down like cherished heirlooms, knitting the fabric of their close-knit community together. This quaint village, shielded from the bustling world beyond, held an array of small, cobblestone houses with wooden rooftops, their windows adorned with colorful flower boxes, bursting with life. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an orange glow that painted the sky, the villagers gathered outside the tavern, their conversations punctuated by laughter and the clinking of mugs. Yet beneath the surface of their joviality lingered an unmistakable tension, an undercurrent tied to fears rooted in folklore, of monstrous beasts prowling the edges of the known world. Sheriff Hank, stoic and rugged with his salt and pepper beard and furrowed brow, embodied the spirit of Timber Falls. A man of the earth, he spent his days patrolling the village, his eyes scanning the horizon like a hawk. He had devoted his life to safeguarding these people, but within him simmered a deep, gnawing fear of the unknown. Hank was a cornerstone of Timber Falls, a man whose heart beat rhythmically to the village's needs, yet each heartbeat resonated with anxiety whenever whispers about the jungle slipped through gnarled lips around the fire. His piercing blue eyes had seen too much, an upheaval of once peaceful days by the return of old tales. He often challenged the whispers, rebuking any notion that drew suspicion to anything unusual. To him, the world was a place where certainty reigned, and any deviation from that norm was met with skepticism. Beyond the village's boundary, however, a curious figure made his way through the dense foliage. Ollie, a baby ape, no bigger than a toddler, shiny coat of chocolate brown glistening in the dappled sunlight, embodied innocence. Ollie was known for his playful spirit, chasing butterflies and tumbling through the underbrush, completely unaware of societal fears and prejudices that awaited just beyond the tree line. His large, soft eyes reflected pure curiosity, tapping into a joy that most of the villagers had long forgotten. To Ollie, the jungle was a playground, but today would bring unforeseen chaos. It was on this particular day, with the sun glistening high and the air warm and inviting, that Ollie, intrigued by the vibrant colors of a butterfly, ventured further from his home. Following the delicate creature, he unknowingly crossed the invisible boundary that separated the wild from the civilized. The moment he stepped into Timber Falls, the atmosphere shifted. Laughter turned to gasps as the villagers caught sight of the unexpected visitor. "What's this?" whispered old Mrs. Harrison, clutching her apron as if it were a shield, her face paling at the sight of the unknown creature. Soon panic rippled through the villagers like a wildfire. Sheriff Hank, his heart racing, barked orders to the residents, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Don't just stand there. We need to protect our homes. This is a omen." His words dripped with authority, sending the villagers into a frenzied state. They gathered improvised weapons, pitchforks, brooms, and even kitchen knives, all aimed at the perceived threat. In the midst of the chaos, children peered out from behind their parents' legs, their wide eyes filled with conflicted wonder and fear. Were they witnessing a monster or merely a confused creature? Ollie, sensing the sudden change in energy, froze. With his innocent heart racing, he looked for that butterfly, wanting nothing more than to play. Seeing Ollie's eyes darting nervously, Hank struggled internally. Could this innocent being truly be the monster they feared? As the air charged with tension, shadows danced on the faces of the villagers, their ancestral fears rising. What emerged from the jungle was not merely an ape, but a reflection of their own dread. And with that, the real conflict began, one that would challenge the very essence of who they were. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting elongated shadows that danced along the cobblestone paths of Timber Falls. The village was set against the backdrop of thick, verdant jungles, where towering trees intertwined in a lush tapestry of green, their leaves whispering secrets to the wind. Warm amber light spilled from the wooden houses, illuminating the faces of its inhabitants as they settled into the evening's rhythm. A sense of calm hung over the community, yet underneath that tranquility lay a tension that had begun to fester. As the townspeople gathered in the central square, the fading light created halos around their heads, resulting in an almost ethereal spectacle. Sheriff Hank, with his square jaw and rough-hewn features, was the embodiment of a man who had dedicated himself to this community. His broad shoulders bore the weight of its fears, and for every triumphant moment he had achieved as sheriff, a shadow loomed over it, occasionally surfacing as an unsettling unease. "We're all that stands between what's out there and what's in here," he would often remind the villagers, pointing toward the dense jungle that loomed invitingly yet ominously at the village's edge. Then, as if scripted by some unseen hand, a flicker of movement caught Hank's sharp gaze. Chirping and darting to catch a mesmerizing blue butterfly was little Ollie, the baby ape, unwittingly crossing the threshold into Timber Falls. His wide, innocent eyes shone with curiosity as he embarked on his playful pursuit. Panic rippled through the village like a sudden gust of wind that stripped the leaves from the trees. Children screamed in delight. At first they thought Ollie was a playful creature, but that excitement quickly morphed into dread. The villagers began retreating behind their wooden shutters, convinced that a monster had invaded their peaceful lives. Sheriff Hank felt a tightening in his chest, triggering his instincts. Gripping his flashlight, its beam trembling as he raised it toward the frightened villagers, he announced, "We need to gather every last one of you. This could be a sign, a warning. We've heard—" He paused to collect his thoughts, sensing the potential for hysteria. "We've heard about the creatures that dwell in those jungles. They look harmless, but they're known to wreak havoc." As Hank's voice boomed with authority, the whisper of ancient tales resurfaced within the villagers. Stories passed down through generations that spoke of monsters prowling the night, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Collective memories of past mysterious disappearances ignited their imagination. "It's a bad omen," shouted one elderly woman, shaking her head as she wrung her hands in distress. "The legends say when we see a creature from the jungle, disaster follows." The air thickened with fear, the villagers' breaths quickened, and the shared anxieties tightened like a noose. Old resentments and grievances simmered just beneath the surface, rearing their heads even amid the chaos. Many had experienced the wild beast's encroachment into their territory before, and the thought of confronting another threat sparked a sense of ferocity. They looked to Sheriff Hank for guidance, seeking to him to act as their protector against the unknown. The spark of solidarity ignited, but it quickly veered into rage as a handful of men began forging calamitous plans, crafting makeshift weapons from farming tools, convinced that violence would resolve their anxieties. "We have to drive it out. We can't let it stay," one man urged, his fists clenched in resolute determination. Clara, a compassionate young woman, watched the growing frenzy from the sidelines, a deep worry settling over her heart. Addressing Hank, she took a step forward, her voice trembling, yet firm. "Sheriff, wait. He's just a baby. He means no harm. We can't let fear dictate our actions." But her plea sliced through only the thin veneer of Hank's determination, barely affecting the palpable tension. The villagers looked at Clara with disdain, their fear leaving no room for understanding. As Ollie, now bewildered by the villagers' frantic responses, glanced around, he began to sense that the warmth of curiosity had turned into something darker. His innocent pursuit had unwittingly unleashed the very monsters they all feared, their own prejudices and the chilling specter of primordial terror that resided within. In that moment, amidst the fraying bond between the villagers and the unknown, a silent dialogue was born. A reckoning of what it meant to confront not just the intrusion of a creature, but the fears that lay dormant within them all, waiting for an unsuspecting moment to awaken. As the sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows over Timber Falls, the villagers gathered in the town square. The air was thick with tension, fueled not only by the recent arrival of Ollie, but also by deeper understood fears that had long lurked beneath the surface of the community. Sheriff Hank stood at the forefront, his broad frame blocking the last warming rays of sunlight, both a protector and a harbinger, his voice rising above the murmurs of apprehension. "Listen up, everyone. This ape, this creature, has wandered into our lives for a reason, he began, his rugged features stern and set. A chilling breeze swept through the square, rustling leaves and unsettling the hearts of the villagers. Hank's voice grew louder, stirring anxiety as old as the village itself. Don't you see? It's a sign. They say when the jungle sends a beast to our doorstep, disaster follows. We've lost good people to the monsters in those woods before. Can't you remember? His eyes scanned the crowd, seeking confirmation, finding it in the nods and murmurs of agreement. I say we take action, shouted Caleb, a local farmer, his face flushed with fear. What if this creature brings something worse? We need to protect our families. Others murmured in agreement, the energy shifting rapidly from fear to hostility. Clara, a spirited young woman with kind, determined eyes, pushed her way to the front. But that's just it. Ollie is just a... She hesitated, weighing her words, struggling against the tide of fear. He's just a baby. He hasn't harmed anyone. You can't just treat him like a monster. Hank turned to her, his brows knitting together in disbelief. Clara, you don't understand. You're naive to think we can treat this like a pet. It's a wild animal. It's unpredictable. We can't let our guard down, not now. But isn't it more dangerous to act out of fear? She argued, her voice firm yet pleading. What if he's just lost? What if he needs help and we push him away or worse, hurt him? You can't protect us by letting fear dictate our actions. The villagers shifted, some nodding slightly as they murmured amongst themselves, creating a rift that revealed cracks in their united front against Ollie. The strength of fear was powerful, but Clara's compassion flickered like a tender flame, too easily threatened by the cold winds of panic. We have to show kindness, not hatred, Sheriff. How is that wrong? Her voice quavered with the weight of her conviction, igniting a flicker of doubt within the crowd. Even Hank felt a small tremor of uncertainty. You don't understand. You might be putting all of us at risk, he shouted, as if his voice could drown out the nagging question in his mind. The fear-driven assertion came as a shield. Even he was unsure if he was protecting them or himself. Ollie, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around him, ventured further into the village. He grabbed a colorful ribbon swaying in the breeze, delighting in the gentle tug. It was innocent, a beacon in sharp contrast to the mounting fear of the adults. As he twirled and danced, laughter from the village children rang out, their delight spurring the ape's frolic into something pure and joyous. But laughter was quickly overshadowed by the stepping forth of a grim-faced group of villagers, armed with crude weapons crafted from what was at hand, pitchforks, shovels, and stout sticks. Their faces were set with grim determination, minds made up about the unknown beast among them. It was a scene that brought a chill to Clara's heart, the very essence of panic taking a tangible form before her. Let's not wait for him to strike first, Hank called out, rallying his throng. We approach with caution, and if it moves threateningly, we protect what's ours. Fear rippled through Clara's veins. You're turning into what you fear, Hank. This isn't a monster. It's just an animal. She stepped forward, voice trembling with emotion. We're not requested to react with violence. We should extend kindness. We can learn to coexist. The tension in the crowd swelled, splitting like a forked branch. Clara felt the piercing eyes of the villagers, their fear morphing into hostility. One villager shouted, "What if he attacks our kids? What can we gain if we ignore his potential as a threat? It's our duty to protect this village." Each assertion stoked a flame of fear, turning attention away from the mischief of the baby ape toward rallying cries for protection. Hank could feel the pressure mounting. The very thing that drove him to be a protector of Timber Falls was now blending with the deep-seated fear that held the community at its throat. Unexpectedly, Ollie, sensing the attention upon him, turned and dropped the ribbon. With wide, scared eyes, he let out a small, disoriented squeak that echoed through the tight-knit crowd. Laughter of children crumbled into silence as the group stared, every heart pounding in rhythm with fear, and yet a strange longing for understanding. The faintest crack of a stick underfoot startled Ollie, and he backed into a corner, flinching against the gathering confusion and chaos. What have we done? Clara whispered to herself, recognizing that monstrous fear was not found in Ollie, but rather among her fellow villagers. fear that could lead to irreparable damage if left unchecked. Chaos swirled through the village of Timber Falls, thick and tangible as the heavy air before a storm. The villagers, once unified by simple routines and friendly chatter, now huddled together in groups, their faces chiseled with anxiety and suspicion. Sheriff Hank, a man used to enforcing order with an iron hand, stood at the epicenter of this burgeoning crisis. The heavy scowl on his weathered face suggested he had become a storm himself, gathering darker clouds of fear and prejudice that threatened to break over the community he had vowed to protect. "Listen up!" Hank's voice, firm and unapologetic, cut through the low murmurs of the worried assembly. "That beast out there," he gestured toward the dense jungle encroaching on the village, "is a menace. You all saw it prancing into our midst, didn't you? That, my friends, is not something we can ignore." His eyes, deep set under the brim of his hat, surveyed the villagers, seeking out their compliance, their fear coiling around him like a noose. But amid the growing tide of paranoia, a single voice dared to rise above the rest, steady and calm. Clara, her brown hair pulled back into a ponytail that bounced with determination as she stepped forward, faced the sheriff. "But Sheriff, it was just a baby ape. Ollie, he's not a threat. He's just curious. Haven't we all been that way at some point?" Her words hung in the charged air, met with disbelief and anger from several villagers. "Haven't we also learned from our past?" Hank shot back, frustration creeping into his tone. "This isn't just about one creature. It's about our way of life. The legends warned us of things that sneak in from the wild, creeping into our homes, bringing disaster. If we don't act now, we're inviting calamity." The villagers muttered in agreement, rallying behind their sheriff, their collective fear binding them tightly together, repelling the ideas of compassion Clara attempted to weave into the tense atmosphere. Around them, whispers of purging the monster began to spread like wildfire, igniting something deep within the heart of Timber Falls. Clara's heart sank. She felt the walls close around her, creating barriers where she yearned for bridges. "But blinding ourselves with fear only gives power to that which we seek to drive away," Clara called out, her voice becoming impassioned, standing as a solitary flicker of hope amidst the raging storm of prejudice. Yet her words fell upon deaf ears. The village prepared for war, gathering makeshift weapons, tools crafted from the very resources that should have united them. She watched in horror as knives, pitchforks, and sharpened sticks became instruments of aggression rather than tools of protection. Rural camaraderie had warped into a fervor of hostility, and Hank was at its forefront, fanning the flames of fear with each strained breath he drew. Just as tension escalated to a breaking point, the villagers, emboldened by Hank's fears, began their march toward the by-now frantic Ollie, who had only just wanted to play. The baby ape bounded from a food stand, his bright eyes wide as he caught sight of the crowd approaching him. He hadn't known fear before. Now it loomed above him like an ominous cloud. "Stay back!" shouted one villager, brandishing a crude spear made from a sharpened branch. "It's for your own good." The words dripped with misguided protection, fueled by a primal instinct to defend territory at all costs. Panic spread through Ollie's sinewy little frame, and he let out a whimper that cut through the noise, raw and plaintive. Pleas from one lost creature to a flock of fearful humans. Then, as if choreographed by fate, a brick, one that once held up a bright stall selling baked goods, was sent flying through the air. Time slowed. Clara's heart raced as she lunged forward, desperate to intercept the danger, but not before the brick shattered near Ollie, sending shards into the air like ill-fated memories. A shiver of horror washed over the onlookers. The fear they harbored had turned against them, most potently manifesting in that one insignificant act. Ollie, wide-eyed and terrified, retreated into a corner, his small body trembling as he gazed up at the sea of angry faces. For a moment, everything hung in the suspension. The reality of what they were in that moment, a hostile mob of frightened villagers, sank in, yet Hank, blinded by the weight of fear, pressed on, his voice rising to drown out the truth. "This isn't just about the ape. It's about our families, our lives. We must drive it away." But Clara, shaken with a fervor that coursed through her veins, would not back down. "Sheriff, listen! Look at him! He's no monster. He's just frightened. Her voice cracked as she knelt down, reaching out toward Ollie, who hesitated, caught between instinct and desperation. The villagers gasped as Clara's plea echoed through them, a reflection of the growing guilt that festered beneath their bravado. Hank faltered at the cusp of decision. Rage surged in him, battling against an emerging realization. The true monster didn't cavort in the jungle. They were confronting it within themselves. The heart of the conflict throbbed louder, leaving the question hanging in the air like smoke from extinguished desires. Would they embrace their fears and reject compassion, or would they dare to confront the monster within? The sun hovered low in the sky, casting a golden hue over Timber Falls as the tension surged palpably through the village. In the center square, Sheriff Hank stood, his rugged features hardened by the thickening fear that gripped the hearts of the villagers. The murmurs of unease crescendoed into shouts, and Hank's fists tightened, the weight of responsibility heavy on his rugged shoulders. Ollie's a monster. First the shadows in the jungle, and now him. We can't let this continue. A burly villager named Dale shouted, brandishing a pitchfork like it was an extension of his own trembling hand. The sight of Ollie, long ears folding back against his large innocent eyes, amplified their fear. The innocent creature stuck amidst a storm of human rage. Each fleeting movement he made sent a ripple of panic through the crowd, his small frame now symbolizing the threat they believed lurked in every leafy shadow. You have to see he's not our enemy. Clara's voice cut through the noise, steady yet impassioned. She stepped forward, her gaze steadying on Hank. This is madness. We're fighting a creature with pure intentions, driven only by curiosity. Can't you feel it? But the fire in Hank's heart, nurtured by years of protecting his home, dimmed with every accusation lobbed at him. Clara's plea felt like a breach in his growing walls. You think I'm the monster here, Clara? Look at the chaos we've allowed. Do you want him to invade our homes next? His voice boomed, though an unsettling tension fluttered beneath his bravado. Is that what you think he wants? It's our fear that breeds the monster, Clara shouted back, her fists clenched at her sides, the resolve in her steady gaze igniting a flicker of doubt in Hank's heart. You don't know what you're asking. He took a step back, but the crack in his armor was unmistakable. The air crackled with anxiety as a few villagers hesitated, torn between Hank's fear-driven rallying and Clara's insistence on compassion. It was at that moment that Ollie, sensing the shifting energies, released a soft whimper, small and vulnerable, a child lost in a crowd of adults blinded by their own malice. Hank's heartbeat thundered in his ears as he glanced down. For a brief second, all the panic receded, and he saw the small creature for what it was. A baby ape, eyes filled with innocence, wrapped in a coat of uncertainty. His breath hitched as he felt a pulse of guilt claw at his conscience. Was this the monster they sought to vanquish? Or were they battling their own reflections? Listen, Clara pleaded, her voice cutting through the weight of the moment. He's as frightened as we are. Don't you see? Relentless anger has distorted our vision. It's not Ollie who is the threat, but the fears that turn us against each other. Hank's legs felt like they were made of lead, a tornado of thoughts tumbling chaotically in his mind. The echoes of the villagers' earlier laughter and sense of community morphed into a cacophony of shouts about purging the monster, and an anguish deeper than anything he'd known settled into his bones. A crack suddenly pierced through the air, the sound of a brick stone cascading against the ground, not far from Ollie, who shrieked in terror. Distant murmurs of the villagers quieted momentarily. Hank's heart dropped as he witnessed fear morphing into aggression, laying bare the monster inside them all. No! He barked as he charged forward, adrenaline coursing through him. Stop! With a sudden, fierce resolve, he tore the makeshift weapon from his waist and hurled it into the dirt, where it landed with a dull thud, an act that silenced the crowd. The villagers glanced at each other, confusion etched onto their faces. What are you doing, Hank? A voice gritted out from the crowd. I'm watching as the true enemy reveals itself, Hank exclaimed, his voice steadying. He could feel the shift within himself. The stifled fear began to untangle from his heart. The real threat is not Ollie, but the aggression we harbor, fueled by our ignorance. We cannot allow fear to dictate our actions any longer. A hushed silence fell. Clara stepped forward, now emboldened and resolute. He deserves our kindness, not our hostility. The moment hung in the air, heavy but electric. As the villagers processed Hank's heartfelt declaration, each pair of eyes fluttered between Ollie and their fuming leader. A collective breath was held. Would they continue the cycle of fear or dare to embrace compassion? In that powerful silence, Hank met Ollie's bewildered gaze and a sense of clarity enveloped him. This was their choice, a turning point in defining who they wished to be. Hank took a step closer to Ollie, and with his heart pounding, he knelt down, opening his arms invitingly, showcasing a sanctuary instead of a threat. "Come here, little one," he whispered softly, his voice trembling with raw humanity. One by one, the villagers began setting down their makeshift weapons, swapping fear for understanding, allowing empathy to seep into their hearts, leaving not just a path for Ollie, but a new chapter for themselves. A ripple of hope swelled through Timber Falls as they began to realize that true strength lay not in aggression, but in the compassion they extended to each other and the world beyond their fences. This was not just a confrontation with a misunderstood creature. It was a confrontation with their own fears, their own hearts, and perhaps a glimpse of who they could truly become. As the dust settled in Timber Falls, the villagers stood together, not as individuals armed with fear and doubt, but as a community bound by a newfound understanding. Sheriff Hank, once a figure of rigid authority steeped in ancestral superstitions, now emanated a calmness that resonated through the air, palpable and reassuring. He knelt beside Ollie, who peered up at him with wide, innocent eyes, the tension of the previous moments shattering like the bricks that had threatened violence. "It's okay, little buddy. They're not coming for you," he murmured quietly, contemplating the gentle soul before him. His heart surged, realizing that Ollie had in that instant become a mirror of everything they had feared: vulnerability, misunderstanding, and the unknown. The change in the villagers was palpable. Where there had once been hostility and resentment, seeds of empathy began to blossom. Clara stepped forward, her voice steady as she spoke to the crowd surrounding them. "What do we stand to gain by chasing away what we don't understand? We could be losing something precious." Her eyes darted towards Ollie, who was cautiously swiping at a blade of grass, and then back to the group, who now looked less like monsters and more like people wrestling with their fears. Hank looked up, realizing that Clara's words resonated deeply within him. "We've been our own worst enemies," he admitted, addressing the villagers. "Ollie here is not the monster we feared. It's our fear itself that has turned us into something monstrous." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Gradually, a few villagers took a step closer, cautiously extended hands reaching for Ollie, who sniffed curiously, seemingly transformed from a harbinger of disaster into the gentle heart of Timber Falls. The cage of collective fear shattered, allowing a glimpse into connection where suspicion had thrived. As they began to gather around Ollie, sharing laughter and tentative gestures of curiosity, the bonds among them strengthened. Old grudges faded, wounds healed under the warmth of light emerging from the heart of their community. Time after time, Ollie wove his way into their lives, showcasing that true growth arises from unity rather than division. After a while, Hank motioned to build a more permanent sanctuary for Ollie, where he could roam freely, nestled close to the village, but also respecting the wild from which he came. "Let us protect this creature who has shown us the truth, that coexistence is possible." The villagers nodded, a unified resolution coalescing around them. As evening descended over Timber Falls, warm light flickered from within homes, laughter echoed, and Ollie found himself at the center of it all, a symbol not of disaster, but of harmony. The villagers shared stories, remembering their fears, acknowledging their past mistakes, and celebrating a future where their hearts could be full. They had learned that monsters did not dwell in the jungle, but lay within their own hearts, and through understanding and empathy, they were given the courage to rise above. Timber Falls had forever changed. It stood not merely as a village shrouded in fear, but as a beacon of new beginnings, united by the lessons learned from a small, lost creature who would teach them the immense value of open hearts and courage. In the fading light, Sheriff Hank laid a hand on Ollie's head, and together they watched as the jungle thrived around them. A shared world of wonder and fear finally harmonized.